Yeah, Ovi, do you want to start?
Yeah, great. Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me a great joy to welcome all of you to today's session, which is very close to my heart and I've been looking forward to. This is a knowledge sharing session organized by the South Asian Regional Support Group for the AYRP. Those who don't know about AYRPs, it stands for the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists, the year 2026. And for preparation of AYRP, a number of bodies are coming together, mainly civil society representatives, pastoralists, civil society, public officials, researchers, and experts. And sessions like these are extremely important, not only to lead to AYRP, but to reach the larger goal of environmental and social justice. This particular session is close to my heart because I've been working in Jammu and Kashmir for the last 2 years. And in a world where pastoralists all over the world have been facing a lot of challenges, including adverse policies, specifically also to do with mobility. The case of Jammu and Kashmir can offer examples of hope and efforts taken to support pastoralism itself. Jammu and Kashmir has been famous for its beautiful meadows and excellent quality wool. But at the background of all of this have also been examples of successful movements such as the Tosa Maidan. There are a number of pastoralist groups in J&K, the Gujars, Bakarwals, and Chopans being the main groups, and they represent a considerable population of Jammu and Kashmir itself. Over the years, they have continued to face challenges, including poor medical and educational facilities, stigmatization, of course. A lot of them talk about how they face discrimination while on migration, especially in the cities. There have been a lot of issues of access to grazing grounds and other resources itself. However, in the last 2 years or so, there have been a number of policies that are introduced in support of pastoralism and pastoralists. And some of these examples are really exciting, and we'll be looking at those today. Some of these things I've only seen being so far done in places like Africa, which are known to have a rich history of policy interventions, specifically for pastoralists. Um, and in the last 2 years, we have also seen pastoralists themselves coming together and organizing and standing up for their rights. And this combination of policy interventions and people organizing themselves has been really hopeful and promising. Today, we have with us one of the best people we can hear from on this topic. Dr. Shahid Iqbal Chaudhary is one of the most proactive IS officers that you will ever come across. And that's what I have experienced in the brief interactions I've had with him here so far. He is the secretary to the government Tribal Affairs Department for the last 2 years. And he has some amazing statistics of reach to the pastoralist community. He is also the Chief Executive Officer, Mission Youth, for the last 2 years. He is known for his approach that utilizes technology for the betterment of community and has very interesting ways of combining technology and on-ground challenges. It's really inspiring to see that. He has served as a district development commissioner to a number of regions all across Jammu and Kashmir, and he has won a number of awards. And I will be actually reading out some because I can't keep track of all of them. First of all, he's won the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Public Administration 2022 by the Prime Minister of India for outstanding contribution as CEO Mission Youth for innovative youth empowerment initiatives in Kashmir, which are to do with education, employment, sports, and youth volunteerism. And it involved around 500,000 youth. He has won National E-Governance Award Gold in 2021, 2022, and this was during COVID times. This was given by the Government of India for use of ICT in effective management of COVID-19 in Srinagar in Kashmir. He has Excellence in Governance Award 2019 by the Indian Express Group for Project Rahat, under which 170 mountain bridges were constructed near schools in remote areas of district Udhampur. And the list goes on, and I will not be reading, going through all of it, but you can understand the kind of caliber and promise that we have in front of us today. So Dr. Chowdhury will be presenting to us for the next 45 minutes, after which we will have a comment from Dr. Anita Sharma. She is assistant professor at Department of Sociology in Shiv Nadar University. She has worked on the Bakarwals of Jammu and Kashmir since 2004. And her book, The Nomadic Bakarwals of Jammu and Kashmir, if you haven't seen it yet, it's a beautiful book with amazing documentation. It was shortlisted for the Crossword Book Award 2010. Now, before I invite Dr. Chowdhury, I request all of you to keep yourself on mute. We will be having the question and answer session after Dr. Anita's comment. Please free to put in your questions in the chat box. We will be taking those too. Yeah, that's about it. Now I invite Dr. Shahid Iqbal Chowdhury to present.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi, for that elaborate introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just trying to limit my presentation to 30-35 minutes, and then after that, I think I would just love to spend more time hearing about the comments and also answering some questions. So this is all about the work we have done in last 2 years, and this is not purely work of the government. This is work done by the communities, community volunteers, elders, and most importantly, all the stakeholders who are involved with pastoral communities in Jammu and Kashmir. So there have been a lot of interventions in last 2 years, and at no point I would be meaning that we have achieved 100% success in a particular sector. Like when I say that we have covered 10,000 families for providing them smart cards to support their migration, I would also mean that 90,000 families are still there who are yet to get these cards, and we are into process. But most important thing is, if you ask me to sum up that what we have done in last 2 years, I would say bringing these pastoral communities on the table. On the table means policy planning, finance, and most importantly, as a part of public policy, which is evidence-based, and we have got into such basics going to the community level, groups level, families, and last at the individual level, covering their socio-economic status and asking the departments for their inclusive development. So I'll just try to rush through the presentation. J&K has around 1.4 million population, and the tribes constitute, tribes and pastoral communities, they constitute roughly 15% of the population. The geographical spread is all across 20 districts at Jammu and Kashmir. Largely in Jammu, we have concentration in border districts of Rajouri and Poonch. In Kashmir, we have huge population in Anantnag, in Kupwara, and Ganderbal. So there is no district which does not have pastoral population. This is the map of Jammu and Kashmir when we discuss about various regions in next few slides. So we can keep this in mind about western area close to the line of control. Then in northern area and eastern side, the people move to Ladakh region in the highland pastures during summer. So these are the statistics of various ethnic groups, population of 2011 and the projected of 2021. This is the previous slide. Yeah. So you can see the names of the districts, and we'll just discuss corresponding pastoral population. Transhumance has been a centuries-old practice in Jammu and Kashmir, and I think it has evolved more as a socio-economic and cultural life here. And when we discuss about basics of the survey, which we did in 2021, we can see that there are a huge number of families which are migrating without livestock. So what motivates them to move without livestock is, I think, their socio-cultural practice, which has been there, and we'll discuss about opportunity cost, what they are losing or gaining during this migration. And again, there are a large number of people who do not have their own livestock, but they take the livestock which is being sublet for grazing by other families within the tribes, within these pastoral communities. So there is a sub-regional identity between these pastoral communities, between the tribes. So that's very important to understand, on which I'll not be focusing much, but I'll just keep my connect on technology, the interventions, and most importantly, how we have got policy driven by evidence for inclusive development of these pastoral communities in Jammu and Kashmir. So these were the challenges, that till 2021, we did not have any database of the migratory population, like how many people migrate, what are the types of migration, their transit, their halt points, their destination. So nothing was available. And when speaking about infrastructure, I think when you don't have database, they were completely excluded from the policy parameters. Like if you're talking about healthcare facilities, veterinary facilities, and other things, we have sufficient, very satisfactory investment in pastoral communities welfare when we talk about villages, because the planning is comprehensive. We talk about indicators at the village level. But when it comes to migration, the people who spend 6 to 8 months out of their homes during transit and in these highland pastures, so I think that was something we were missing for all these decades. So these are the few points which I'm just enlisting. I will not go into each one of these. Like you can see that the Forest Right Act, which was implemented in all the states of country in 2006, started taking roots in Jammu and Kashmir in September 2021. So the kind of efforts the community is putting up, the volunteers from within the community, the government agencies, so that can be just imagine the kind of stakeholdership we are striking since last 2 years or so. So this is what the migration looks like. Largely around 50% migration of these pastoral communities is intra-district. They move from one tehsil to other tehsil, from villages to the highland pastures. And secondly, it's inter-district, which comes at number 3. And inter-province is population-wise the number 2nd type of migration, where the pastoral community families, they migrate from most of the regions of Jammu to highland pastures in Kashmir, in Ladakh. And lastly, we have some examples, around 7 to 8% population, they are migrating to Ladakh Union Territory, parts of Punjab, that's lateral migration, and parts of Himachal as well. So these are largely 4 types of migration. So I'm just putting some pictures of village, the dhokes, and during the transition, how it looks like. Like we told in the beginning, the best meadows you have in Kashmir. So these are the places, these are the destinations of migration of these pastoral communities. So after starting with these challenges, we reached to the community, because it's very important that when you plan something for community, you cannot do sitting in your offices when you are dealing with such a complex socio-cultural and economic system of these migratory tribes. And you cannot take your policies to them for implementation. So what we did in 2021 April was that we went to these highland pastures during their migration. Our teams studied their migration pattern, and many of our colleagues and us, we camped for 2 to 3 weeks in various areas, reaching out to these people, understanding what kind of policies would be needed for their inclusion in healthcare, in education, in welfare, what kind of livelihood opportunities they would require. So planning something for their livelihood sitting in your office would not get translated into their empowerment unless and until we understand what they want and what's important for them. So I've just put some points here that the survey of highland pastures were done to cover all the households. So we covered every single highland pastures and every single family, every single person. In a survey which lasted for around 10 weeks, varying in some districts it was completed in 3 to 4 weeks, and some districts took 8 to 10 weeks as well, depending on the population. So GIS mapping was done for all the routes. When I talk about routes, I'm talking about every single family. I will show in some slides later on that when you go into the database, you can see a person starting his journey from the western part of Akhnur area in Jammu district. He is moving to say Dras in Kargil. So we know about every single family that what kind of route they are taking, what are the transit routes, and what are their halting points, and how many days they take from their origin to destination, and what have been the days they have been following. So when we talk about climate change, you can see that they have given in database that during many years back, they have been migrating in April, in the May, but again, in last few years, we see that the migration starts even in first week of March. So there have been climatic changes which are pushing, which is again changing the pattern of migration and time as well. So after this database was collected about the physical migration, we reached out to all the highland pastures and checking about the inclusion in services like access to healthcare services, veterinary services, education. So we got some disturbing figures, like in education, 93% of population did not have any access to healthcare facilities. That prompted us to get a new policy of tribal ashas and mobile medical units and ambulances. I'll be just discussing a few slides later. Likewise, in education, the literacy rate was dismal, around 16-17%, but we have good number of migratory schools now, around 1,200 migratory seasonal centers, where our educational volunteers are certainly doing great job and putting their best efforts for education of children from class 1 to 5, and in some cases in higher classes as well. So these are just few snapshots of our first survey. Seeing these photographs, you can see the challenge our people face reaching out to them, and then you can just imagine the challenges faced by these communities in surviving this harsh climate and this mountainous region to reach these locations and surviving this socio-economic tradition which has been centuries old in Jammu and Kashmir. Like I discussed about community consultation, so irrespective of any hierarchy, any other thing, we reached out to them, sat with them, discussed what was a priority to them for, say, education, for livelihood, for women empowerment. So, like I discussed earlier, there is a diversity of pastoral communities in Jammu and Kashmir. So, a policy which might fit, say, in Kishtwar region of Jammu, will not be adoptable in Kupwara of Kashmir. So you need to have some basic interventions, some basic understanding of local culture, their life, their ethos, their traditional knowledge, and it's very important to be very sensitive to devise a policy when you are talking about the people who have been excluded from, the benefits of various policies for many decades or centuries. So then we took a very empathetic approach in devising these surveys, and a lot of input, a lot of brainstorming sessions went into it. And I'm thankful to all the district administration, the DCs, the team. So they did an amazing job here. So the average height of these meadows is around 12,000 to 16,000 feet above mean sea level. So hereafter, I'll be referring to two things. One is village and second is dhok. So when we talk about villages, we shortlisted around 400 villages which have a population of 500 tribal people each, and they have 50% or more of tribal population. I will just repeat that we identified around 400 villages which have 500 tribal population, and the overall population of these pastoral communities is more than 50%. So last year we approved a new scheme for them to achieve saturation in healthcare facilities, education, and other basic amenities. So under this scheme, we are giving 1 crore rupees each to the village over a period of 1 year. And then under convergence, we get a lot of funds from schemes like MG Narega and other schemes, centrally sponsored schemes available. Then we made a separate, first time a plan was devised for dhoks, the highland pastures, after this interdepartmental survey. Then we have a separate budget for healthcare of migratory families starting this year, like we discussed about COVID. So we achieved 100% vaccination in highland pastures, this COVID vaccination in 2021 and second time in 2022. Then there are 4 districts which were having high prevalence of tuberculosis. So Government of India has deputed their special teams to highland areas of these districts for covering these cases. So again, this is just few points that how we went to these areas using technology, creating awareness, and consultation was the cornerstone of this, because entire survey process was decentralized. When we left it to the districts, giving a template, so they innovated the kind of survey they wanted to do, because the basic template was fixed, where we had to cover around 10 kind of services. Health, education, veterinary care, livelihood, skilling, literacy rate, and other things. So many districts went beyond that and devised some special planning, which is like in Udhampur in Jammu, Rajouri, in Anantnag district of Kashmir, in Shopian, in Pulwama. So these 5-6 districts have invented really very well and devised some local plans out of the district capex budget, because the kind of gaps we found were really disappointing, glaring gaps were there. So the concerned deputy commissioners, they earmarked funding from their district capex as well. So in all, around 12,000 officials were deputed for this survey across around 3,900 dogs. Again, which is a huge number. And we found that around 612,000 people migrate every year. So that puts the migratory pastoral population of Jammu and Kashmir more than at least 35-36 countries. So then you can understand the kind of challenges we are facing. So after conducting this survey, we went for some policy changes in 2021, which were concretized in 2022. And you can see in August 22, we made it mandatory for all the departments that they will earmark funding proportionate to the pastoral community's population. So I just thought to cite a recent communication from a department that, like this science and technology department, has a budget of 20 crore. So they have written to us to give a plan for 2 crore rupees for covering these pastoral families which are migrating. So this is true for all the departments. If you talk about road connectivity, power supply, healthcare, education, social welfare, agriculture, horticulture, so all the departments, they have made it mandatory from this year to earmark funding that is proportionate to this pastoral population. There is intersectoral convergence, like tribal affairs department does not have a huge funding at its own. We just try to do some gap funding in some districts. Our main role is regulatory and doing these studies, research work, and asking the departments to take steps on these gap analysis. So here I would like to highlight that in 2021, what we did is that a gap analysis survey was done for all the villages. Like which villages, which tribal village, which village having more than 50% pastoral population has a power supply for, say, number of X hours. So we asked the department to augment the power supply there, and based on this feedback, based on this gap analysis, the planning and budgeting is being done by the department. It was done last year. So this year we're in second year of planning, where the funding is being earmarked in these departments. And I will go to my first remark that when I say this thing has been done, I would mean that certainly the challenges, the huge challenges are still remaining, where I think, but I would agree that I hope you will agree that a strong foundation has been laid for recognizing the rights of these pastoral communities. From this year, we have two types of budget. One is centrally sponsored schemes, which have scheduled tribe components. So that is being earmarked, and then the tribal sub-plan, which is being cut out from the district and UT capex as well. So the survey helped us to formulate evidence-based public policy, which was required for a very sustainable support to these migration systems and for inclusion and welfare of these pastoral communities. Then we focused on the development of villages as well, and then the empowerment of communities I'll be covering in a couple of slides. Like these are the routes these families take, roughly 400 to 600 kilometers, taking 30 to 45 days, depending on the number of livestock and the type of migration. If you are taking through national highways, partly, or maybe through the mountains, so it depends on that. So for simplifying the migration, these were the few interventions which we have done apart from GIS mapping, geotagging of all 98,000 families, and we are just supporting education in our hostels there are hostels for these students from pastoral communities, and we are coming up with residential schools as well. So as I said, the journey from here is long, tough as well, but a foundation is there and we are working on this. Then we are providing, we have established some transit accommodation, like our accommodations have already come in Pulwama, in Shopian, partly in Rajouri, coming up in Ramban. Where these pastoral families during their migration, they can halt for a day or two. These places have been decided purely based on their feedback, their traditional knowledge. Where were the places where they have been halting for all these years? I mean, maybe change due to climatic conditions, security situation, partly for many years. So based on that, based on their recommendation, we have come up with a network of 8 transit accommodation right now, and around 30 are being planned this year in coordination with Forest Department and Wildlife Department. So this is just a snapshot of Tribal Smart Survey mobile app, which was given to the surveyors. and offline and online data uploading option was available. So you can see the kind of parameters which we generated about their tribe, village, panchayat, the kind of livestock they have, gender, education, age. So this minute coverage of database of every single person, it helped us to come to the basics of policy making, like I talked about healthcare. So when we went to Government of India, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, there was no discussion about approval of posts of tribal ashas, which will be there in the highland pastures, about mobile medical units, about ambulances. And the Jammu and Kashmir government took many proactive steps to cover these gaps based on this database. So this is what the backend looks like. You can get a macro picture, total number of families surveyed, males, females, and you can have a matrix of district-wise and household available. Any kind of analysis you want to do, you can go with that. Like this is route information. What is the origin for, say, family number 83 in the ID? They have origin at this place, then halting point, and the destination. It will give you the number of days as well. So these are some of the changes which we brought in the system, and in last 2 years there have been a lot of improvements. And one very satisfying thing is that the community is very proactive. Say if we are saying that we deputed 100 or 200 lorries for covering this national highway part of migration. So wherever there is a delay in truck or trucks are not available, they are not aware where they are deputed. So they call up our call center, they reach out to us, even the youth from the community. So they are very proactive in facilitating these things. That's a very positive thing about the pastoral communities in Jammu and Kashmir, that it's not planning from the government side, it's demand from the pastoral communities, and in a very positive and very engaging way as well. So this is what we started in 2021. Recently, when I was in a conference at Italy, and we discussed in Ethiopia as well, that there are varied views about the migration transport system, about climate change, other things. But we have done a huge study on this, that the kind of saving it means for the pastoral communities, like they end up spending 30-35 days because of various traffic issues related to only single highway we have. So it reduces a lot of time as well, and it means a smooth movement of traffic during horticulture season as well, and the number of days saved by the communities. I'll just show in next slide. Yeah, so this is the kind of support system we are just trying to provide. And as I said, the challenge is huge, and we have to do a lot of work in this year and the years to come to ensure that every single family is getting this benefit. So the migration time is reduced. This is picture taken from same place. So migration time has been reduced by around 80 to 90%, and around 90 lakh man days are saved. Say around 6 lakh people are moving for around 15 days, 20 days. So we calculated based on their movement, the number of days it is saving, and the kind of animal productivity. A detailed study done by our colleagues, researchers from the veterinary faculty of Jammu. So they have done a tremendous research on this, that how transportation through this national highway part or Mughal road part of migration is meaning a lot of animal productivity and their life being prolonged. Then again, it means disaster risk mitigation during harsh climatic conditions. So this is what we have introduced, and we are just trying to strengthen it. And I would just like to underline that this is not for all migration, because mostly the 50% migration takes place in highland mountains through the passes, and whatever takes the route of this national highway. So we are supporting it through that area. These are the hostels we have come up with, and the pictures below are from Tribal Research Institute, Jammu, which is playing a major role in devising these policies. Like I said, we have covered around 10,000 families from this month for providing them smart cards. So it replaces the previous archaic NOC system from many offices, permit system. So this is a one-stop solution, that once you have this survey, so entire database is there, and you just need a card reader to see the kind of services are to be extended based on their requirement. About education, as I mentioned earlier, we have around 1,200 migratory seasonal centers, and these are few of the intervention which we did in last 2 years about improvement in scholarship, which is being done through DBT. Now, establishment of more than 400 smart schools, which are primary schools in pastoral villages, which focus on primary education, because we have these Eklavya model residential schools. So the primary education has to be strengthened for enabling these students to get the benefit of education in higher institutions. Then a lot of measures were taken for improvement of fee for tutors, sports education, then providing tabs to the students who are enrolled in our hostels, establishment of few residential schools. So these are some snapshots from our smart schools which have been established in far off villages in Jammu and Kashmir. Then we came up with the concept of transit residential schools. Like we came up with our first biggest school in Pulwama district of Kashmir, another coming up in Shopian, Rajouri, one coming up in Poonch. Apart from the central government's initiative of Eklavya schools, we have come up with this initiative of tribal transit schools. Like if you want to go to the highland pastures, and you can have the admission of children in these schools for period of 6 to 8 months when the families are migrating. So this is one option which is being made available, and it has been received quite well in the community, and it's encouraging us to plan more such schools in other remote areas. So these are few snapshots of hostels and buildings which we have made available. Again, few pictures of seasonal centers and from our hostels where we have provided them tabs and other support material. The tribal ashas I discussed about earlier, the concept is that the women educated up to class 8th or class 5th, they are being engaged, trained as healthcare workers. They are the first response staff from health facilities to cover vaccination, to link to the local sub-centers. Then we have, last year we flagged off around 41 ambulances. This year again, equal number of ambulances is being given to highland pastures and these pastoral villages as well. So we are trying to facilitate, create facilities. Talking about FRA, so there has been a lot of discussion about the level of FRA implementation in Jammu and Kashmir. So I would admit that we have been very late. Like it started in September 2021, which was when it was rolled out. So in last year and a half, we have allotted titles to more than close to 5,000 community rights have been already conferred under the Act, and around 600 in individual cases. You can see the comparison between Jammu and Kashmir, but J&K is again slightly different. Like in the middle of forest, you will find an area called as Chak. Chak is a non-forest area within the forest where these pastoral communities have been residing since centuries. So during the time of Maharaja, these areas were taken out of forest during the first settlement. So that area also constitutes an empowerment and conferment of rights. So here again, I would compliment the local community members, the volunteers, the young boys who are doing tremendous work in informing the community about filing their claims. So they are doing great work. So comparing FRA progress in other states, I think the start has been impressive, but the challenge again is very huge. And I think the kind of role being played by the community and obviously the departments will certainly have some good results in near future. Then in December last year, we notified the livelihood policy, which is centering around the non-timber forest produce. So earlier we used to auction the forest produce. Now the local communities have been empowered. So here again, a lot of education and a lot of awareness is required and is being done both by the government and the individual volunteers from within the community. So this is something which is again empowering, that you get all the resources directly to the community and they can use it for their welfare, for their economic benefits, or processing and marketing as well. So it has been allowed under the new scheme which was introduced in 2022 December. About veterinary, I have already discussed that the kind of initiatives we are taking to cover in disaster response. Again, just to cut short on the time, we declared natural calamity under SDRF norms when it was heavily snowing in higher areas and there were a lot of loss of livestock. So again, that was done first time in many years, and I think this will become a routine. In case of any disaster, the response would have to be there from the district administration, police, security forces, which was seen last year. And declaring calamity under the SDRF is again a good precedence for a responsive disaster relief. Few pictures from last year response system. And for livelihood, I think we have covered more than 20,000 families over a period of last 2 years in helping them to establish their sheep farm, sheep units, dairy units, and extending them support of skilling and other basic networking for obtaining financial support from financial institutions. So most of these projects are 100% sponsored by the government. The demand is very high, like in a particular district like Kupwara, where you send a sanction for 200 sheep farms, you will have application of around 5,000 people. But with this beginning, I think we'll be achieving saturation in next few years, since the government system has taken a huge step for recognition of an evidence-based intervention for policy making, particularly for pastoral communities. These are few snapshots, like we are giving vehicles and other things to the youth of the community who have applied under various schemes. These are few pictures from sheep units and farms allotted to various pastoral community representatives in different districts. Then about skilling, like in the year ending 31st March 2023, we trained more than 2,500 women in various trades. And many of these women have started their own work also, and a lot of work has to be done to help them to take to the next level of production and marketing, which we are doing this year. Here again, I will just say that when you talk about an evidence-based public policy, you get results very soon. If you just raise slogans, then I think nothing can be achieved. So again, one point in question is that when we went to the pasture, we found that a lot of people, they just waste the wool produced because it's of low quality. There are no buyers, there is no market. When we talked to the traders, they talked about the quality, the short length of the fiber, and poor, no facilities of grading, and the poor quality wool coming from there. Then we went to the Central Wool Development Board and we got a grant from them. You can see we had a field visit from the Central Wool Board, and then our team went there for approvals. Then we received sanctions few months back, and this year we are covering more than 30,000 families, these pastoral families in highland pastures, once all of them reach there, to provide them machines for shearing, to create these special self-help groups which will be doing this, and to establish mandis in Jammu and Kashmir annually for procurement of wool. So what will happen is that it will skill the youth and provide a good staple length of wool quality grading will be there, and there will be huge return with little investment because largely it's being wasted. So this is just one example. So I'll just rush through our last 2-3 slides. Then the next intervention was Vandhan scheme, under which we are providing around 15 lakh to a group of 15 local groups which are into, say, any kind of work like non-timber forest produce, horticulture, agriculture, handloom, handicrafts, any kind of work they are doing. So 1 lakh per unit, and around 15 lakh we are giving to a cluster of 15 groups in the pastoral village. This has been again decentralized to the districts, where the district level committee headed by the deputy commissioner has been empowered to select these families. There is a call center also. Every day we are receiving 100-150 calls depending on the business. Like during migration, we receive more number of calls. So these are few transit accommodations which were recently under execution and have been completed. One in Pulwama, other in Shopian. Then we are just trying to reach out to highland pastures to reach out with the implementation of centrally sponsored schemes, because they have been deprived of these benefits for a long time in absence of database, since they were not there in census, sometimes in census and in socio-economic survey as well. So this is the first and credible survey which has been linked to various government schemes as well. Then we have established TRI, which is into 3rd year of its operation, which is focusing on documentation of their art and culture, supporting the people from the community for promotion of art and culture, documentation of their traditional practices. And again, a very satisfactory moment is here that we got around 50 fellows from different sectors, like in health sector, in livelihood, and other fields. So they have done tremendous work documenting the gaps and coming up with the detailed project reports, which were funded by the government for various sectoral interventions for welfare of pastoral communities in Jammu and Kashmir. So on last slide, I will say this is just a beginning. Last 2 years have been very enriching for all of us. We shared our experiences at various conferences, like we were there in Ethiopia, and before that in Italy, in Georgia, in Albania as well. So the kind of interventions we have made in Jammu and Kashmir again holds a unique example in itself. But as I said, the quantum of problem is huge. Like the population which migrates is itself more than the population of 35 countries individually. So that is the kind of challenge we are facing. But I see a lot of hope in the community youth, particularly those who are like I discussed about FRA, and I see the people going out to various remote districts and educating and creating awareness among the pastoral community members about the procedure for filing their claims under FRA. So I think that's a great hope in Jammu and Kashmir, and we'll be focusing on education, livelihood, and other services. So I'll end up here with a brief video, around 4 minutes, and then we can take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhary. Yeah, it has opened.
Jammu and Kashmir is home to world's largest transhuman migratory tribal population, which has been put on focus of UNESCO and international organizations through an innovative project launched in April 2021. This population migrates seasonally between summer pastures and winter pastures to sustain livelihood. Till 2021, there was no estimate or data of migratory tribal population, pushing them to abject poverty and keeping them out of welfare and development plans. Finally, an innovative project involving use of technology and convergence of resources launched by the J&K Tribal Affairs Department in April 2021 brought this population on priority focus of planning and also leading to global recognition. More than 12,000 employees, along with community volunteers, conducted survey of highland pastures called DOGs, geotagged each of the 98,000 families and completed GIS mapping of DOGs, migration routes, transit halting points, and resource distribution. Stakeholder consultation and greater community participation remained hallmark of the project from planning stage to implementation. Senior government functionaries camped in the highland pastures for several weeks, a first of its kind planning exercise. The survey also found dismal coverage under human development parameters. 93% migratory tribal population had no access to healthcare. 88% reported absence of veterinary healthcare. 72% reported absence of educational facilities. Literacy rate was reported to be just 16.74%. Such profiling was done across several sectors. Based on this survey and digitized data, the department, under this innovative project, launched a series of interventions with visible outcomes in a very short span. Technology was introduced to replace cumbersome manual system of movement permission in solar-powered tabs with remote areas provide best of technology, infrastructure, and capacity building. Veterinary healthcare strengthened through deployment of more than 40 mobile veterinary clinics and introduction of chip-based remote monitoring of livestock health, immediate rescue and first-time relief days to just 2 to 3 or maximum 4 days. Online booking is made through kiosks and measures have been taken for recognition of their rights. A web portal developed for Forest Rights Act has so far benefited more than 20,000 forest-dwelling nomads in processing of their FRA cases expeditiously. A strong system of grievance redressal has been put in place, which includes IVRS call center, tribal helpline, field visits and feedback from community, awards to recognize contribution for tribal welfare, telemedicine interface, IT skilling of youth, migration portal, and several other initiatives. This innovative project has ensured
Yes, that's all from my side. If there are any questions or any remarks, we can continue.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhary. This was a wonderful presentation, a rich overview of all the different activities that you're doing. And it's amazing to see how a lot of it is a good amount of teamwork and done in participation with the community, as you say. I think each intervention can have its own separate presentation of 45 minutes, 1 hour itself. But as you said, the strong voice of the community itself makes a lot of difference in implementation of all of these ideas. Um, and as you rightly pointed out, all over India and across in this region itself, there is a lack of good quality quantitative data. And it's really good to see that you have managed to get that foundation really good for Jammu and Kashmir. And I see a lot of work being developed on just that. For example, the maps. We are still struggling to get high resolution, good maps of livestock keeping communities, and it's really good to see that you have that taken care of. The web portal that you have set up with all of that information, I think is going to be extremely useful. The FRA and NTFP related work, I think, yeah, as you say, it needs more focused efforts now. The wool has been interesting. again, all across the country, we have seen that wool prices have reduced a lot, and a lot of pastoralists are not selling the wool anymore. And I'm wondering if there is more to this story and how we can move forward with this. And I really hope that some of these activities are taken forward into the future. Thanks a lot for your talk. And now I invite Dr. Anita for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ovi, and thank you so much, IG, for such a wonderful presentation in such a short time, in a very concise way. You conveyed so much that your department has undertaken in the last 2 years. I remember in 2021 when I was there in the Secretariat with you, in that meeting when you'd invited the media and you just launch the survey. And the high hopes that you had about certain initiatives that you wanted to fulfill. One can say, surprisingly, considering I've been working now with the Bakarwals for over 2 decades, that something like this is clearly unprecedented. One has been going to the tribal research, tribal department in the Secretariat for 2 decades. But these initiatives that you have undertaken and the achievements of the survey speak for themselves. And thank you very, very much for doing this, for providing qualitative, quantitative data, reports from the ground up, detailed mapping, the numerous initiatives for youth, for education, for health, or for sedentary plus mobile populations. I think one can safely say that's, an initiative of this kind is sort of unmatched in the country, or even for nomads at large anywhere, really. I don't know if even in Africa, as Ovi was comparing, something of this nature has actually been undertaken, and so many initiatives done in such a short span of time. So for that, I would deeply like to congratulate you. And I'm, like all researchers, extremely thankful. And also as somebody who's worked with the community and has, affection and sense of, being almost a term like kinship could be used, coming from an anthropological perspective. So for that also, one is deeply, deeply touched, very grateful, very thankful for all the initiatives. And we really hope that something of this nature can be undertaken in all states that have sizable nomadic populations in the country. And, apart from pastoralists, one would hope that, then these endeavors are also done for, communities that move, that don't herd animals, that maybe do several other things that are nomadic, but not pastoralist. So, let's hope that this jinx that has been posed in literature between the nomad and the state, in this kind of a framework, with this kind of technology, with this kind of access, let's hope that, these two otherwise opposing forces, as one conceives of them in literature, can actually work in tandem and help each other and help, the larger populace to go forward. Having said that, coming from an academic perspective, we must critique and we must kind of look at the gaps in however great an enterprise is. And here, I'd like to just ask you a few questions that can help us to granulate a lot of what you've done in the survey. One is that, of course, we'd like to ask you how you yourself, being from the community, has allowed for an endeavor of this kind to take place. So how would you respond to a question based on, what is the role of your own identity as being part of the community in allowing for all these changes to take place? What has that brought in, and how has the state stepped in, with your knowledge base and your background to be able to, for you to carry out a survey of this kind and all the other initiatives? You also talked about evidence-based public policy coming out of an endeavor such as the survey, because now you have evidence, and now with that you can pass policy which would actually work on the ground, because now you have a certain amount of evidence. So another question to ask is, how for such a large population in a state, I mean, we are not just talking about 0.012% or 2%. You are saying that that's 15% of J&K's population. So I want to ask you how, according to you, why in fact you think that was missing for such a long time. Maybe this is a slightly political question and you might not want to respond to it. In that case, please say so, but please don't skirt around the issue, because as people, as social scientists who study state and politics and bureaucracy and so forth, an insight, an honest insight would be really, really welcome. Then all the various initiatives to do with education, for example, so many initiatives to do with health, tribal ashas, they are incredibly innovative. Then the new forms of mobile schools, sedentary mobile schools, the ones at the primary level and so forth, these are great. But again, coming from a certain perspective of understanding these positions from an academic perspective, one would think that many of these initiatives are kind of road centric. I mean, they kind of seem to stop where the road ends. Whereas, after being immersed and after having done field work with the Bakarwals, as I'm sure so much that ails them, even though so much that is invigorating and amazing, is also something that starts after the roads stop. So, what are the points of contact from, say, where the road stops and when you have to maybe go on horseback or, maybe on foot? So there should be, I think, building blocks that go from the road to the final pasture. Because, sometimes it may take 3 days for a Bakarwal from a particular dok to come to the nearest road head. Also, because of the distribution now between, how things work out between districts, blocks, zones, sometimes you are tied to the wrong zone. So, sometimes in a 5-hour journey, you could go to Kargil, but you'll have to come to Kishtawar, even though your pasture is right next to Vadvan near Kargil. You'll have to make a 3-day journey to go to your particular a base to be able to get resources, etc. So how are we also, in a sense, shifting, the bureaucratic apparatus or the machinery of the state to be a little more flexible in a certain sense that would actually work on the ground for the Bakarwals in these kinds of spaces? Also, then the question comes to monitoring. I have been kind of trying to look at mobile schools, how well they work and how well they don't. There is, at least still recently, one can say that there was almost no monitoring of what kind of education was actually taking place. And very often one found that the mobile school that was in place was with an elite set of Bakarwal families. And the people who were actually the workers, their children actually had no mobile school. And in a certain sense, it's not even feasible, because for every 5 children, then you'd have to probably put a small tented mobile school. But how are you going to fill these kinds of gaps that look at equity, that look at monitoring, that look at, a certain amount of, this gap between the nomad and the state? I'm sure these are things even you've thought about. And, it's maybe impossible to fill every last gap, but it is my job to also kind of point them out and to see if you might have not thought about these things. So, and all these initiatives, they are absolutely amazing. The new tribal research institution that was just recently launched in Srinagar. This is an amazing initiative. But again, let's hope that it's not just oriented towards policy and what the government wants, but is also doing qualitative research that may not be directly of relevance to the government. Let's hope that kind of research also takes place there. Also, in terms of, all the scholarships, all the programs for the youth, the tribal transit schools, again, there is this danger that unless these schools are tied to the migratory cycle, the child might be really estranged from their traditional life, which is not to say that every Bakarwal child has to become a Bakarwal. After all, a few generations ago, all of us came from villages. That's not the point. But the point is, can we create mechanisms in school education that are sensitive to the migratory cycle? So the children, when they go back, are not absolutely isolated from their traditional life and knowledge systems. And they know how to herd, they know, the work of their parents and so forth. And they have a certain empathy, and whether that kind of component is also part of their education. Say schools like Sekmol, etc. in Ladakh, they are doing incredible initiatives like that. Then again, the initiatives that you're talking about and the amount of funding that is there, it's really, I can't express my gratitude, for being a researcher on Bakarwals, that these things are finally happening for the Gujar Bakarwal. One thought that one would not have come across such initiatives in one's lifetime, the way things were going last 2 decades. But then we are also very, very surprised by the animal husbandry department and the incredible initiatives that they are taking. So I think now there's a certain, there's a combining of forces between what's happening at the center and then what is taking place, say, in Jammu and Kashmir under your ministry and leadership. There is, again, a certain danger that, so much, again, might attract, migratory populations to sedentarize. We hope that, underlying all of these incredible initiatives, as is often said in literature, I hope there isn't that kind of a hidden enticing bias to try to make the nomads sedentarize. So I feel that, one cannot impress upon this point enough to say that the biggest priority should be to help the migrating pastoralist. People in villages, Gujar and Bakarwals who've settled down, they should actually be behind the people who are migrating in priority in terms of wanting to reach out to those populations and so forth. Even though that is perhaps the more difficult endeavor, from the point of view of bureaucracy and the state machinery and so forth. So what would you like to say about that? Just also very quickly to point out that certain things that I thought could also be undertaken as initiatives would be to monetize in certain ways, as has been done in other states, the mangani or the dung of the animals. Apparently in Rajasthan, that sells more than meat in terms of just monetary returns. It's the backbone of the agricultural machinery in Rajasthan, and generates more income for the Raikas and others as compared to, say, cotton or mustard or tea for certain states and jute and so forth. Another very important initiative that one can think of is for solar panels for migrating peoples, for internet connectivity for migrating peoples, for activity-based learning initiatives, incredible amount of training for mobile school teachers, radio education, using technology really to reach the last child. and of course, undertaking initiatives such as cheese making, etc., that we had even discussed when I was in Kashmir, and we had a quick chat. And also to caution the state machinery that even if one has a certain kind of a framework for maps, etc., one should be aware that these maps change all the time for nomads, and therefore a certain flexibility tied to everything that we might otherwise be tempted to concretize and cement. Yeah, I think I'll stop right there. And thank you again very much for this incredible work that you've done, and we've all been amazed. And I also mentioned it in my J&K chapter. In the COVID survey, we had undertaken perhaps the only such survey of its kind on pastoralists. So thank you very much again.
Thank you, ma'am, for that elaborate comment. And frankly speaking, I have not come across so many questions after my UPSC examination way back in 2008. So that's a quite long list of questions from you and some other colleagues. I've just noted down a few points. I'll just try to do justice with each of the questions. And if there are any questions left, I have shared my email ID and my Twitter handle also. You can send me a message or email any one of the colleagues. There is one gentleman writing a lot of questions, so I'll just request him that I'll put a few points in answer, and then if there is anything else, he can mail me if there are any specific points. So going back in reverse, you talked about personal identity. So I think that gave an added advantage of building a trust and getting a positive feedback and communication. And somewhere I think in public policy, it does matter when we talk about political priorities and other things. So I think in public policy also it matters the kind of connect, the kind of feedback you can have. And I think most importantly, it played a role of trust building within the communities, because it matters a lot in the kind of language, in the kind of words, in kind of gestures you communicate. That speaks a lot about your seriousness in such professional policy making domain. And that could be a coincidence. I don't take credit for that, because there were more than 12,000 such people who were on ground, and they were working where they have lived for decades, and they are with these communities. So they were not outsiders. So it holds good for each one of us. So why the population was excluded? I think there is another related question, that how such schemes could be extended to other Himalayan states, and what are suggestions for other states. So I would say is that a credible database. I have been serving as the district development commissioner for close to good 10 years. So everywhere I have found that people would come to office and they would say that there is a lack of healthcare facilities. There is no education. Like one gentleman wrote that there are no schools at so and so places. So how do you come to that policy landscape to understand and accept that these things are not existing? When you have a database, say if somebody is saying that we do not have healthcare facility, as a subdivisional officer or district officer, you ask your counterpart in healthcare, in health and family welfare about this, and he would say, no, so and so other health center covers this area. So he's the gentleman in the department is right from the jurisdictional point of view. The pastoral community member is right from the deprivation point of view. So the middle ground is that when you have a credible database, nobody can deny that. So it's very easy to make open generalized statements that this is not happening in a state, this is not happening in a district. But if you are really committed, as a policymaker, as a stakeholder, as a researcher, so you have to go to the basics. You have to have the credible database. Like my experience with the health secretary, when we sat for a meeting. So I mean, but what I feel, I think things are on camera, so he might not have felt what I'm going to convey in subsequent slides, like the kind of things I was putting. So it was general. When we went to specifics, discussed about data of more than 612,000 people in our portal, whether they are having healthcare facilities or not. So the wheels started rolling. The kind of funding that department has pushed, healthcare department has pushed in the last 2 years, that is again unprecedented. And again, I would say the challenge is still higher. So my answer to this is that when you did not have a database about the migratory population, the question was too general. So I will not comment on politics of it, but from policy making point of view, if the data was there and it was denied, so that would have been one case. When the database is not there and there is no policy, that is another case. Whether there was willingness from the bureaucratic level, from political level, I leave that question open to all the members to decide. but we were not doing justice with the quality database we ought to have as policymakers. Then there is one question about alpine docks and grazing areas vis-a-vis the mapping. We did two important things. One was that gap analysis in villages which have majority population from these pastoral communities. And second, our focus, I would say it was 70-30, 70% on migratory population and 30% in villages for this part of policy making. So we focused on migratory population, and the grazing areas within the villages, they were not a part of our reports directly or part of our survey, but they still exist on our revenue record that is available. And I think that's a very good suggestion that we can go for some evidence-based policy making vis-a-vis the development of pasture lands. Then very important remark from Ms. Anita has come about the tendency of maybe prompting the nomads or migratory population to settle. I think the entire effort in last 2 years has been to the contrary. And this year, for the first time, we have started a huge research project in our department. The kind of ecosystem services which these pastoral communities are providing. We were discussing in Addis Ababa in March about grazing land management, that if you leave this grazing land unattended for decades, this will be turning into barren lands. There is no ecosystem management because this livestock is there. The manure also leads to enrichment of soil, the grazing, other things. So all those things are being documented with help of our colleagues from Veterinary Faculty Science in Jammu, Squast University. So this is something we are doing, and the entire effort is to support this socio-economic, scientific, and cultural practice of transhumance. So we are not in favor of that. I'm in favor of asking people to settle down, because that would be, again, I think, not climate friendly. Also, when we are talking about climate change, other things. So these communities are putting huge investment in climate action, which has never been documented, and we'll be doing it this year with the help and support of people like you. Road centric. Again, I would say that it's up to you to see the glass full or glass half. When we talk about the efforts, the seriousness, and the foundation of new initiatives, I think things are reaching. But I gave a qualified statement earlier also that when I say that the 10,000 families have benefited under so-and-so scheme, I also mean that the 90,000 families are still remaining. So the effort is there. When I said that the number of dogs have been identified, the number of families have been mapped, and everything has been done. So the steps are being taken. When you talk about regional presence or geographical presence of these pastoral communities, you will find huge disparities within these pastoral communities. Like you talked about the rich and the poor, the strata within the tribes and other things. So these things are existing, and I think as policymakers, this is our responsibility to ensure inclusion. So that's what the topic of my discussion was, inclusion, that we are focusing towards that. Then Mr. Ramesh Bhatti has suggested a presentation to the Government of India, and we are very open to that. In fact, we have been sharing sectoral intervention. In October 2021, we approached the Office of Secretary, Ministry of Animal Husbandry and Dairying. So we could not get an appropriate time during that time, and we shared our database feedback related to animal husbandry and sheep husbandry in Jammu and Kashmir. What were the gaps? Likewise, we have shared these gaps with all the ministries in central government and the departments in government of Jammu and Kashmir as well. And the Central Ministry of Tribal Affairs has been very sensitive towards this, and they have been asking the ministries to take proactive measures for allocation of resources to concerned departments under the Scheduled Tribe component of centrally sponsored scheme. So if there is any such invitation from Government of India, we'll certainly come with more detailed presentation, because this was general, as Ovi mentioned, that if we are asked to make a presentation, say only on one topic, so we can take a day giving you a presentation about the status of or state of healthcare conditions of migratory pastoral communities or those in villages in Jammu and Kashmir. So there is a rich database. There was one question from Irfan that why we are not putting this database, or this is suggestion that putting this on website. So I think personally, I feel that is an infringement of privacy rights also, because if you want a specific project, you can approach the department with the justification what you want the data for, like the researchers, the universities are taking from us, but we are not putting this in public domain for various reasons. There are a lot of issues related to security, identity, right to information involved in this. If there is any research body, any researcher who comes up with a specific plan of intervention, maybe for making a policy for a research. So we can help if it is helping the local community, otherwise it's not being done. Residential schools sensitive to migration. So the kind of schools we have been discussing broadly, 4 things. One is smart schools in those areas which are remotely located. The idea is to provide some good facilities, equip the teacher as well, their capacity building, linking the parents and teachers to focus on the primary education. So we have been able to establish more than 400 such schools in last 2 years. Second is our seasonal centers, which are acting a bridge gap. I'm personally have my own reservations how successful we can make these seasonal centers could be made, and I think effort has to be there. We can't deny that these seasonal volunteers are working in very difficult conditions and with meager salary also, which was enhanced from 4,000 to 10,000 per month last, I think 1.5 years earlier. So again, we are working at the government level how to have a continued policy for this. So our third type is our transit residential schools. EMRS is one scheme of Government of India. When we talk about transit residential schools, the idea is that you can have the children admitted in the school nearest to your highland pasture. Like we have already established 2 schools which are functional, and the highland pastures are just 4 to 5 hours walk from those schools. So idea is that you migrate also to that place. You have a school, residential school there, which has same syllabus, same content, which you have in the schools when you go back. So this is again not an easy cakewalk because when you talk about balancing their education, socio-economic conditions, and supporting the migration. So there has to be a trade-off between one thing and other. And we have to take some harsh decision also. And I mean, if you are talking about supporting the migration of pastoral communities, so a lot has to be done by the department, which is not a part of the regular governance system. I hope you understand that. And infrastructure, migration through forest area. There is one question whether they migrate from forest. Yes, certainly. Most of the migration is through forest area, and most of these dogs are not most, but I think 100% of these dogs or highland pastures are forest areas only. And there are 2 types of area. I said one is forest area. In some areas, these dogs have been declared as chucks. Chuck is again a residential area, an agriculture area within the forest, which has been taken out of the demarcated forest. So that is one part. And second, where they have got community rights, and even in absence of those community rights, these people have been migrating, and they are the real owners of these forest areas as well. And I think Forest Department and the Wildlife Department have been very sensitive in responding to our policy interventions. Like when you go to Shopian, you will find the transit accommodation constructed well within the conservation reserve in a wildlife sanctuary, following all the procedures. So the Forest Department is also responding to the requirements of these migratory pastoral communities wherever it is required. Schemes for pastoralists, Mr. Sharik is asking what are the schemes. So there are a lot of schemes, but again, I would say that when you have a database, when you have a planning, then you can approach the department at central level for funding also. And in the tribal department, we don't seek funding from Government of India, because if we start getting funds from Government of India and start implementing ourselves, then our main domain of monitoring and evaluation the performance or outreach or coverage of services by other departments, that purpose gets defeated. Then we end up becoming just another department. So tribal department is a regulatory organization also, that you have to ensure that all the departments are doing their constitutional duty. First, identifying those gaps in these areas having pastoral population, and second, allocation of resources proportionate to population. I think that is what we have been struggling since last 2 years or 2 or 3 years, and that has been done by the government with a great effort under the leadership of the Lieutenant Governor. And I think this is again unprecedented, that you reserve the funds in every sector for the population. Then Mr. Arun Dixit has again asked about 3 to 4 main gaps. Like I discussed, in healthcare, we found that around 90% population did not have access to healthcare facilities, and for which we got with new interventions. In education, again, there were glaring gaps. In veterinary services, around 87% people were not getting benefit of various schemes. So again, the departments were approached to cover these families. And livelihood schemes were not covered at all. So like the photographs I showed you from sheep or animal husbandry department related interventions. So largely around 80% of the migratory families were covered, because these livelihood schemes did not reach these areas. MG Narega is not extended to forest areas, except when you are talking about Amrit Sarovars or other, these Amrit Sarovars are being constructed there, and creation of water bodies in some area, and in Chucks also. So MG Narega is largely not extended to forest areas, except those fringe areas which do come under the Forest Development Agency, FDA, and the related scheme setup. About the traditional wool, yes, we are doing, and this is covered under the new schemes of Central Wool Board as well. Is there any question which I have not responded? I think source of income is largely sheep husbandry, and when they go back, it's wage labor also, but largely the source of income is sheep husbandry.
Monitoring.
Dr.
Yeah,
There was a
three
question
more
on-
questions. One is about the
There was a question on
there
monitoring,
is-
Shahid ji.
sorry, what's the question?
There was a question on what kind of monitoring are you doing to ensure that, for
Monitor-
example, in my field work,
Monitoring of
there were mobile schools, but
Mhm.
the teachers would not even come to the highland pastures.
No, again, I would say that's an alarming statement to say that the 2,200 teachers in 1,200 seasonal centers are not coming. So,
No, I'm talking about one particular valley
Yeah.
where the ZEO, the zonal education officer, they would come to him, they would meet him, they would wine and dine him, and I don't know what transpired, but they would not go to the school. There were several teachers like that.
see, these are universal problems. The school dropout and other things that, teacher absenteeism. Why has the government come up with the use of technology for monitoring attendance? Because there was
Yeah, so
Central-
internet and those
No,
kinds
no,
of
I'm giving you an
solar-
example. I'm giving you an example that there has been absenteeism of teacher in urban areas, in villages. So that's why the government had to come up with technological interventions to monitor attendance of employees. So these thing might happen at many places. I'm not denying that. But I'm saying that there are mechanisms. If somebody is saying that a particular school is not functioning, so there is a mechanism. You can approach the contact zonal education officer. You can inform the local administrative officers. So there are ways and means which are there, and then who is responsible for if a particular school is not working? The community as a stakeholder can always come forward, and we are not living in an age that if a school is not functional, they will not report. But certainly, if there are any gaps, they are being taken care of, and we also play our role there.
Thank you. There are a few more questions that I can point you towards. A couple of people have asked about chopans, and
There is
as they
one
are
question
not
from Kasha,
considered.
transhumance is too regulated. So I think I need some more information on that question. What exactly is the undermining pastoral rationality and relationships? So I think I'm not able to understand what exactly is the question here.
Natasha, if you can ask the question yourself.
No, I haven't. In that comment, there is no question. Actually, I'd asked other questions about approaching public officials and about how these schemes can be adapted in other contexts and such. But the comment, what I was saying is that oftentimes, for example, any intervention when brought in obviously has trade-offs. Right. So like, for example, if you have trucks to transport the pastoralists, the trade-off is that there is some sort of regularity expected, or like notification of dates and such expected. Or for example, if you have particular sort of transit camps or school areas, then that's a location around which the pastoralists might want to cluster to make use of these services. So I wonder how these things alter the spatio-temporal dynamics of movements. So maybe they change the timings of how they move, or, when they would go to certain places at certain times, or they might even change routes to benefit. Maybe other pastoralists who might not have access to these might want to change their routes to access such services as well.
Yes, certainly that's a very important point. And like I discussed while elaborating on a previous question about, the excitement may be not an appropriate word, but a priority among the policymakers that working for a settled life for migratory communities. We discussed earlier why we are against this and why we just want this to be supported. based on the evidence, based on the kind of contribution they are making to the ecosystem services, to the local climate and environment as well. So I think if I'm understood correctly in my presentation, our entire focus is on facilitating the migration as it is, through their migration routes to the destination, and in no way in clustering this. When we talked about the transit routes or transit accommodation, I remember Dr. Rahi is here. When we first discussed about planning this migration, so he was the first to discuss about the types of migration database we were having already, the kind of routes they are adopting. So when we went to the local individual or local family level, so when we got details of transit locations from them, so we came up with transit accommodation at those locations only. Say, when we talk about Pulwama, when we talk about the transit accommodation near Pir Ki Gali or maybe in Ramban or in Rajouri, so these are mostly on those transit routes which are existing and in no way diverting their transit routes or maybe the destination as well. So the idea and the endeavor has been that our policies should not be in conflict with the migration routes, the migration socio-economy, their cultural practices.
Thank you. I can read out to you a couple of more questions. A couple of people have asked about Chopans, of course, and other groups that might not be considered as tribals, and how do these schemes, how can they these schemes
Certainly.
be extended to them?
Chopans are again a pastoral community. They are largely in a few districts of Kashmir. Again, a microscopic minority of population. They undertake same migration and livestock rearing, but they are not still a part of scheduled tribes, which largely my department deals with. But all other schemes, like when we are talking about healthcare facilities, so those are available. But when you are creating a healthcare infrastructure in highland pastures, if you are sending your team for vaccination, so obviously the vaccinator will not ask whether you are a scheduled tribe or not. So in the dogs, all the population which is there, they are given the service of vaccination. So likewise, that holds good for all other services as well. So if any service is covering a particular dog highland pasture, so all the families present there are done and nobody is discriminated.
Okay. There are a couple of questions about youth. One asked by Natasha, how can youth be supported and how can their dignity be secured? And another question about women by Bhavna. What about women? Any schemes for women on migration?
Yes. If you remember during my presentation, I discussed that it's, very challenging to reach out to the community, that you have to sit at their level of understanding. As I was at IAS Academy Mussoorie last month and I was discussing about the resilient future. So when we were talking about community centric communication, so my point of argument was that when we when we know that the community is aware of certain disasters, the kind of risks which are available, which are there in a particular area, which are posed in a particular geographical area, and we want the community to take some action. We want the community to take a particular action. So the first question we need to ask ourselves is that why the community is not taking that action already. So are we asking them the right thing to do? So here I want to say is that when you are communicating with the community, you have to understand the local socio-economic conditions or their aspirations in life from their point of view. Then think about the kind of services which you can extend. On youth front, I think we have been doing largely good work and there is a lot of feedback, and I would say the problem of plenty is there. When you talk about schemes, we get more youth from the tribal community than we can actually accommodate, say, for our schemes in education, in sports and other things. It's not related to one department alone, but the whole of the government approach is there that all the departments have to do that. For women, like I mentioned, that in a year or so, we covered around more than 2,500 women for our skilling program. So the response has been amazing. I don't see any gap of reaching out. So I think problem could be on our side, that what's the level of reach out, what's the quantum of facilities which is available on platter which we can offer to them. So I think from the community side, the response has been largely very encouraging and we have been reaching out. But again, I said that the problem or the challenge is huge. We are working on women also, and we are as a parallel to the tribal ashas, our next initiative is about Anganwadi centers for these migratory communities. And again, it's difficult for me to make a policy announcement here, but it's again under consideration at a very higher level in the government that we should establish these Anganwadi centers at par as we have done for tribal ashas as well. So I think these are the few measures which are being taken by the government. And again, I will take you back to the evidence-based policy making, that when you have a database, say if you're talking about education, so if you just run through a search in the portal database which we have, you will come to know how many people out of these 612,000 have studied up to, say, class first to PhD. You will get each and individual name, gender, age, region, village, everything. So when you have such a kind of database available, you can reach out to the policymakers for covering these areas. So I think that is something we have done, which lays a foundation for women empowerment, for youth empowerment, for education, other things.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions towards the end, but I think you have kind of addressed them. About one from Muzammil Rashid. He says, I've been working in the transhuman pastoralist community for the last 3 years. It is an ethnographic study. Unfortunately, my subjects do not know about most of such schemes. My question is how to reach targeted beneficiaries.
So I think we just, I would say, as a policymaker, I do not use the word subject. Maybe you can get in touch with the department and tell us where they do not know about the scheme and where we need to connect. Like I said, that again, I'm saying it's nth number of time, that when I say that 10,000 people have been covered under a scheme, we have made a beginning, but that also means that 90,000 are still out of this. And I think we have to work together on this. At least we have made a beginning, we have made some innovation, we have made a policy, and it has become a part of the governance. So that is something, I mean, there would be a lot of questions. Then you ask yourself that what has been done in, say, 3 decades, 5 decades, and in a century, and you have so many questions for what has been done in 2 years. So that needs to be seen in that parlance. I said, we are not here to discuss what was historically not available to them, but what are the ways and means to reach out. One gentleman is saying that his subjects are, I don't know what is this meaning of his subjects. If he mentions a particular area, a particular population, he can link up with us, he can write a mail to us. I have given my mail ID also. We can reach out to those people for any particular benefit if they're eligible for that.
Thank you. Dr. Chaudhary, I had one question about how do you see the role of NGOs being in all of this? Because one thing that I've realized working in this part of the world is that NGOs are still, like, they're just starting to be more active and powerful here. And do you see any promise in collaborating with NGOs? And do you think they might actually help in bridging this gap between schemes and the community?
See, I have had mixed experience with the NGOs. Way back in 2010, I was in Leh as a young officer responding to a disaster there. So my experience was not very encouraging. Then many years down the line, there have been very good NGOs and which have contributed a lot, but coming specific to pastoral communities in Jammu and Kashmir. But I think the local youth from within the community, Zahid and others are writing something about the points covered. So I have seen Dr. Rahi, Mr. Zahid and others going to mountains in harsh climatic conditions, talking to the people about the Forest Rights Act, how they have to fill up the applications. So I think the local volunteers from within the community, from within the region, they have done tremendous work, but I have not come across any credible or bigger NGO which has made an impact in Jammu and Kashmir for pastoral communities during at least my 2-3 years of experience at policy level, or maybe in last 10 years at district level. So, but individually, these people are doing great work. Dr. Rahi is running a tribal culture and research foundation. So I think that foundation single-handedly has done great research work, which has not been done by many research institutions. Mr. Zahid and other colleagues are here. They have joined this conference. So I have seen them going to the most insurgency affected areas, most difficult places, where they have done tremendous outstanding work for community empowerment. So here my experience is more about individual and the local organizations from within the community, or those researchers associated with this. They have been supporting us in this.
Thank you. There is a question by Suhail Rasool Mir. He asks, why don't we have mobile meteorological units for pastoral communities?
I think that is something very over-ambitious at the moment. Given an option, I would ask for stars, everything. But after 2014 floods, it was the first time that the advanced meteorological equipment centers were established in Srinagar. We had to see that deluge of Kashmir Valley to get those advanced technological interventions here. And one thing is there, I have been to Dogs, and I'm not an alien to the process. So I think all of us are there on radio. And my personal experience in of June 2022 snowfall was that they had the information, and fortunately there was not a single loss of life. There was huge loss of livestock. We saw disturbing pictures of 500,000 livestock dead in highland pastures, but the people moved to safe places. This is something that traditional knowledge also, I think, pushing everything of our experiment into these pastures again may not have very encouraging or good results. So like Dr. Anita discussed earlier, that we have to be very sensitive and cautious when we are talking about highland pastures. What are the ways and means? So Met department going to every pastures, I think we'll have to discuss about that.
Thank you. There is a question by Natasha. Have you had the chance to share these experiences with colleagues from the Tribal Affairs Department of other states? What has been feedback? What has been the feedback?
On a lighter note, I will say that I think as administrator and policymakers beyond a period, people do not discuss much, ask much, maybe learn new things. We end up with meetings, other things. So we have offered to the Central Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Till now, we have not been asked by any other state or union territory to share our experiences. In comparison to that, we received invitation from at least a dozen of European countries, like again, like the way we had in Africa also. So the kind of interest from developed countries, which we have received in our intervention, I think is something lacking in our own states, where these steps need to be taken. Because in 2021 December, when we were in Albania discussing about the survey which we did and the kind of interventions we were doing, we came across many of the interventions which were being done by Montenegro, Kosovo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia. So the kind of things we learned from those countries were also tried to be replicated here. And many of our interventions, like the system of lorries, this operates between Albania and Kosovo and part of Montenegro. So I think there are many success stories within many Indian states. And like somebody from the central government said, that there should be an interaction at the ministry level, central government. So we are willing to offer all our experiences. We may not be adopting a particular technology in the right way, or maybe our experiment could be wrong, but somebody could suggest us for improvement, and maybe we can learn from their experiences. So I think that is something which we are lacking here, and I strongly support this, that there should be some platform for experience sharing between all the states which are working with pastoral communities.
Thank you. There are a few representatives of Chopin community here in the audience, and they are asking, we are real pastoralists, but the government has not included us in ST list. How can we avail benefits of tribal schemes?
I already responded to that. The kind of benefits and services are available. It's particularly not in the domain of a civil servant like me to declare the communities. So this is again done by the under process established by the Constitution, by the Government of India. So I think it's not appropriate for me to comment on this.
Yeah. All right. I'll take the last. It's more of a suggestion or a request by Sarfraz Farooq. He's saying, Dr. Shahid Iqbal Chaudhary, sir, please take initiative to make a volunteering team for tribal research pertaining to culture, education, etc.
I will say one thing here. In 2021, we notified many fellowships around 20 different domains. Not very happy or encouraging to see the kind of research proposals we receive. So what I suggest through the medium of this platform also is that anyone, if he wants to like we received a proposal from an organization about a publication of a book. We immediately approved that. We received a proposal from veterinary faculty and faculty of agriculture of SQUAST about establishment of some beekeeping units and other things. They came up with a research telling us the gaps and the kind of benefits it would accrue. And it's very encouraging to see that within a year they have delivered what they proposed us. So I would say two important points, that if a researcher, if a person is making a proposal in response to our notification, so it's always good to show your proposals for a peer review, maybe your guide. Like my personal experience, that I'm not good at researching and writing. As a civil servant, my domain was completely different. So when I started with some international conferences or publications, So I would send my paper to many of my college classmates who are teaching faculty in veterinary college and others for a peer review. So that gives you an enrichment of your paper as well. So the kind of proposals we received, I think 90% of them were not worth consideration. So I would strongly encourage our youth that if you want to do some real research, which is helping us in making a policy based on that evidence, so please come up with a good, credible project planning. Like somebody just writing a mail on my personal ID that you have notified these fellowships, so give me one. So the gentleman has done PhD in particular subjects. So in those circumstances, it's very difficult for us to even respond to these issues. So I think it's very important that young people who are exposed to research, who are doing some research in these sectors in particular areas, they should certainly come forward. Money is not a constraint with the department anywhere in any of the departments. So your proposal has to be very credible.
Thank you. Many thanks, Dr. Chaudhary. I think you did half of my work of moderating the question and answer.
There is
Sure.
one question from administrator about distribution of solar cookers, panels, and lights free of cost. Like in last 2 years, we covered around 40-50 odd talks about with solar lights. So this year, the Science and Technology Department has reserved 10% of its budgeting for solar cookers and solar lights and these panels. So again, I would say 2 crore is a very small amount, and instead of spreading it across the districts, so we asked our colleagues to select the 4 poorest blocks where having this migratory population in highland pastures, which are poorest of all aspirational blocks. So we are focusing on 4 to 5 blocks this time to give a saturation, and these schemes can be availed in others as well. Soon we'll be having a notification on this.
That's amazing. There is one more last comment from Sarfaraz Farooq, request to please provide tribal library.
I will just say that
areas.
I had a program here which was organized by FICCI with the university. I had come for that. So I have already missed that program and that is over. So if you want me to continue, I can spend 10 more minutes. I don't understand the tribal library. You mean library for the tribal people or tribal literature in the library? So if he can elaborate on this, maybe we can discuss about that.
I think both.
Then someone is asking, kindly send the available data and information, any update sources to this email ID. It's difficult to send an entire database. If you are working on a particular subject, please do write to us the kind of database you would need. We'll see your proposal and definitely share the data with whatever you require.
Thanks a lot. I think Tatsama has shared contact details of both Dr. Chaudhary and how to reach the group, the regional group as well. So I request everyone who wants to reach out to Dr. Chaudhary and the larger group to use those contacts. I'm also saving the chat. So if you need a copy of the chat, it's there. The talk itself is being recorded. Now I invite Dr. Arun Dixit, the chair of Regional Support Group, for a vote of thanks.
Okay, thanks everyone. The onset, I really thank Dr. Sahid Chaudhary for excellent overview of how evidence-based policy making actually help the real needy people of our society. Actually, that's a really interesting work the state is doing, and your team is doing. It's a excellent thing, and it's a very, very enriching learning experience for all of us. We are taking a lot of things from here, and certainly we'll try to see different places. We are trying to explaining these kind of exercises to other state partners, and try to see how this can be expanded to other areas. So in that sense, it's a very excellent presentation. A lot of discussions, a lot of questions had come from the different members of this group. Very interesting questions also, and I think we are all satisfied with the kind of a response we received from you. Now, as a chair of this RISG group, and this is a very preliminary thing, but I am also a very keen learner of this entire pastoralism exercise. So I personally feel it's a very, very enriching experience for me also. as a group, then it's my duty to extend my vote of thanks to Dr. Sahid for his excellent talk. I also thanks Ovi for her taking care of this whole session, moderating the entire session very nicely and very articulative manners. I also thank Dr. Anita for her excellent commentary on whatever Dr. Sahid explained. But then she also gave a very different perspective, very what you call as an additional perspective about the entire processes. So with that kind of commentary, we definitely find a lot of good things is happening, and there is still a lot of things has to be done. And which Dr. Sahid already said, it's a half. We can say it's a glass filled with a half water, half filled glass water, or something like that. So it's always that case. I also thank Natasha for taking this initiative. This is her idea to start dialoguing this kind of a workshop, knowledge sharing workshop, as part of the IYRP and as from the RISG group. So she's taking a lot of interest, and we all extend our thanks to Natasha for excellent organizing this thing. And then all other members who are participating in this thing, it's a good numbers. I'm seeing that more than 40 participants are there. We are all hearing from here. A lot of questions are coming. I can see stalwarts like Dr. Shadana is there, Ramesh Bhatti is there, Manoj Bhai is there, Vivekanandji is there, and all other members whom I'm not that familiar with, but then I know because of they are part of this conversation. They are very keen learners. We are all keen to support this cause of this pastoralism. So in that words, I'll extend my thanks, vote of thanks to everyone, and hope we'll come back again with the similar kind of learning workshops, knowledge sharing workshops from other quarter of this country. So with that, thank you everyone. Ovi, you can take care of it.
Yeah, no, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining in. It's good to see such a great audience, and wishing you all a good evening ahead.
Thank you very much, everyone. Ovi, Natasha, Shahidji, Arunji, thank you very much.
And also,
Nice to see
yeah.
Iqbal Saab also in the audience. Manoj ji, Vivek ji, Sadhana ji, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's very encouraging when, stalwarts like you all are listening.
Yeah. And also this is the time for us, to strengthen and also to our work because of IYRP 2026. This is the right time, and we see that we take it forward with the experience of Mr. and also to others.
सर मैं बशारत चौपान कश्मीर से हूँ. मैं शाहिद जी से पर्सनली मिलना चाहता हूँ. क्या मैं उसका अपॉइंटमेंट मिल सकता है मुझे? हेलो
मिलना चाहते हैं, प्लीज आप मुझे एक मेल कर दीजिएगा. इंशाल्लाह नेक्स्ट वीक मुलाकात करते हैं, जरूर मिलेंगे. मैं रहता ही
Iqbal ji, this whole learning is very excellent for the Himalayan states of the country and for Nepal and Bhutan. I think somehow we need to find ways and means that this learning can be taken to all these places. In addition to Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal, Uttarakhand, and other places. Thank you. It was excellent presentation. Thank you, Dr. Iqbal.
सर क्या मैं आपके पर्सनल नंबर मेल कर सकता हूँ सर? मैं बशारत चौपान कश्मीर से हूँ.
आप ईमेल कर सकते हैं. ईमेल कॉन्टैक्ट्स दिए हुए हैं, आप देख लीजिए.
I think he might be a pastoralist community.
Yeah.
Have the email facility. Let him talk for a few minutes.
I will anyway share my contact details.
बशरात जी, मैं आपको डॉक्टर इकबाल की मेल आईडी भेज दूंगी, आप मेल कर सकते हो.
चलो जी मैडम, शुक्रिया.
Thank you everyone. Yes.
Thank you madam.
Thank you.
Thank you डॉक्टर साहब. Thank you डॉक्टर साहब. Thank you डॉक्टर साहब. इंशाल्लाह मिलते हैं, वहीं पे मुलाकात करते हैं.
Thank you all.
Okay ma'am, okay.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye.